Like so many of us in this hobby, we buy lots from people, we buy secondhand stuff, and often in the bottom of these boxes we find things that are just sitting there and we never know if we're ever going to use them or not, or we're going to use parts from them, we're going to strip them. And I was looking through the box the other day and I came across this old Jouef Loco that was a Pacific that was kind of interesting, and just by chance later on the afternoon while doing some tidying up, I found what appeared to be the tender for this. So I went online and discovered that it was a model made by Jouef in France in the mid-1950s, and it was called the Loco Pacific 231C. Doing some more research into this, the model had been on the Jouef books for decades. I think it was still being released in the original moulding from the 50s with improvements such as better wheels and a different motor. It's a much loved model in France, even though it's not one for the rivet counters. In fact, I've watched a few very high standard models and layouts by French model train hobbyists. They always run this model. It has a great affection with French modelers in HO. So I was looking at it and wondering if it could be in any way brought back to life. There was some very severe damage. The smoke deflectors or bafflers on the front were both cracked down the middle. They were made of a different plastic than the rest of the body, which was styrene. It was definitely 1950 style plastic. It has a brittleness to it, which was apparent in both the pony truck wheels, which are made of plastic, and the rear wheel at the back behind the drivers. The Loco itself, I put power to it and amazingly it ran. And even more impressive, when I ran it around the track, it had a flywheel effect. And this flywheel effect was due to the motor, which is elongated inside the unit and it's affectionately referred to as a sausage motor or a Souchon motor. Crawled over points nicely and so on. Then when I hooked up the tender to it, I discovered that it had no pulling power. Couldn't even pull the tender. I cleaned the wheels and so on. There are no traction tires. I took the motor out and looked at it. Literally a gentle touch with your small finger would stop the motor in its course. It's a classic model from its era. Very severe mold lines from the injection molded process on the top. One buffer was missing. One of the dual headlights was missing. And all over it there were broken bits and pieces such as the handrails and so on. Also on the very top there was this gaping hole. You could see the weight that holds the Loco down underneath it. Looking online, I discovered that was a moulding for a separate piece. That was a pair of cylinders that fit in there, presumably because it was difficult to mould that in whole one piece. But this had fallen off the top piece, so I would have to fabricate. I wasn't going to go online or have them shipped over from France. They were quite expensive, the ones I saw. Replacement ones. So as this model is never going to be brought back to factory condition, I decided that I would fabricate from Plastico or whatever else I could find. The tender itself had a European style MEN coupler on the back. It was all black like the Loco, and it also had the wrong wheels. It had a metallic, it looked like Lima wheels are put on there, and there was a hook, a rudimentary hook made of wire that attached to the locomotive. At the back the coupler was put on what looked like green stuff, the 2-part epoxy resin, Games Workshop. After I had replaced and repaired all the details on both the tender and the locomotive, I spray painted it in grey primer. It was amazing how much was broken on it. It's one of these things where you start off thinking, okay, there's a bit broken here, this is missing there, and so on. There was quite a lot. There was steps missing. The buffers I replaced, as you can see them at the front there. The handrails, most of them are busted or broken. And I had fabricated the 2-cylinder tanks on the roof from Plasticard and a few other bits and pieces. I rounded off the edges with Liliput. And I filed down the mold lines best I could, and in the grey primer it looked like they had all vanished, so I was quite happy with that. And I could do nothing about fixing the smoke deflectors. They were just plastic, just wouldn't take any glue. It wouldn't work. It was as simple as that. I just left them as they were. I could live with the defect of that. At this point I had to do something about the tender wheels. I replaced them with 4 Triang very, very old coach wheels that fit perfectly in there and brought the tender up to the correct height. They should be spoked wheels, but again, it didn't bother me. They're underneath there. They're not really seen, and they rolled very well inside the trucks or the bogies. Kept the rudimentary wire connector to the locomotive as it worked. It was functional, and I repaired some steps that were missing and some handrails. You can see here where it says the Jouef logo and the number 231.C.60. So then it came to doing something about the motor, and here is the famous sausage motor. But there was no way I could fix it. The magnet was gone. There was no strength in it. It was impossible to open, so I gave up the ghost on that one. And I did what I do on a lot of models. I fitted a 24-volt motor. It was a very cheap one, like a €1 one from China, with a nylon cog to engage with the brass drivetrain system of Jouef. I just brought the motor up to the height, engaged with the cog, with a couple of shims of plastic card, and it was a straightforward wiring thing into the pickup system from the driving wheels. I ran it around and it worked great. Original Jouef motor couldn't even pull the tender, and this thing had no problem moving along. And you can see it here happily pulling the tender. And it even got better when I added some more extra rate. You can also see some damage to the plastic on the chassis. That was easy enough fixed with liquid cement. The plastic pony truck wheels at the front and rear wheel were all cracked, every last one of them, and the flanges were missing. I used the old trick of baking soda and crazy glue to fabricate new flanges and sanded them down until they were correct. Now, these old plastics are often full of little cracks that are waiting to break at any moment. Good tip to get around these is to lightly coat these plastic wheels. Tamina thin liquid plastic cement coated gently over these plastic wheels and other parts. It seeps into the micro cracks inside them and glues them back, and it basically fixes them forever. I painted the model with Vallejo acrylics with a brush by hand. I outlined the wheels as is on the prototype in the tender in white. The brass banding, did it with a gold marker, and we'll just finish up with this inexpensive, rewarding and attractive model pulling in a small regional French train.